Hello, my favorite people. I am talking today about Art Deco because I'm a big fan. I'm finding out myself that that's totally my aesthetic. And because I want to make some changes in my apartment, I've been doing a lot of digging and a lot of gathering information. So what I could do in this video, I could just make another video about like the history of Art Deco, the famous designers, the rise, the fall, the revival of Art Deco, but I think that's not very useful. Therefore, what I'm going to do is talking about three key elements and what are the characteristics of Art Deco, but also how can I then translate some of those characteristics and implement them in my space, because that's the hardest thing to do, is to put it into context and like actually apply it. And since I'm a textile designer and I love decorating, I want to share what I'm learning, what my process is, and then ultimately how I intend to transform these ideas. Today I'm focusing on three things that are the most important ones. The first thing is what kind of colors, so specifically wall colors, what kind of color palettes were used, and then what can I do in my space? How can I make it feel Art Deco? The second thing is materials. What kind of materials were really in? How were they combined? And again, what can I do to make it feel like a real Art Deco apartment? And then lastly, it's in combination with the materials, but also what kind of shapes. What kind of shapes were very prominent in the Art Deco period? And then again, how can I infuse those kinds of shapes in the different design elements and decoration elements in my apartment? As for colors, Art Deco did not hold back. It was a really, really rich lifestyle and period after the war, after the First World War. And so they used a lot of high contrast, jewel tones, really saturated colors. So think like in the same room, they would use a turquoise and a red. And then in order to have the high contrast, they would do some black lines. I think there are such good examples of how layered and how intricate they would just do the walls. There was so much thought and detail, a lot of lines. Like I feel like a lot of thought went into giving the interior a structural, architectural, layered element just by how they decorated the walls. Also think silk moire wallpaper or velvety wall panels. They would also not hold back with just the color. They would also infuse a lot of symbolic, and which brings me kind of to also shapes. They would use Egyptian motifs, Egyptian designs and influences, and also storytelling, Chinese and Asian elements. There are textiles and wallpapers that have whole sceneries that depict a certain moment and storytelling through the wallpaper. A big thing were the Greek keys. I feel like you find those elements on so many, not just furniture, but they would also do like a fireplace that has like the Greek key ornament around it, and a lot of African art and elements. But they did not only use rich jewel tones and saturated, they also then paired those saturated colors with neutrals, so but warm neutrals, so think like beiges and browns. And I think it's this contrast between the richness of the color palette in contrast and paired with those neutrals. It is bold, but it is also enveloping at the same time. When it comes to materials, they did not hold back. There was a bit of everything. There was glass in all its variations. Really precious metals, chromes, golds, matte and shiny. A lot of lacquered wood, burled wood, ebony, like exotic woods. A lot of texture to show richness and opulence. And also fabrics, super rich. So a lot of embroidery and a lot of velvets and a lot of silks to really have a drapery in the fabric and also give this lush shape to the textile and the curtain, for example. You can also find animal prints, and I think it also has to do with world discovery. To give a bit of context, it was a time where a lot of industrialization happened, like the machine age. So there was a fascination with industrial elements, and I think they really went for big and bold. Also world discovery, like more travel was possible through industrialization. So people could go to the world expositions and find out about other things in other countries and continents. Yeah, it was also the discovery of other cultures. So I think that's why they were so obsessed with anything that is exotic, like African, Asian, Egyptian, Greek. Also really developed cultures with a lot of history. So I think they just wanted it all and combine it all. To touch on the different types of shapes, there was a lot of geometry happening, repetitive lines, fluted architecture, chevrons, zigzags, checkered patterns, very angular. They also have this thing for like a fan shape or like sun rays. Also again, repetitions. But instead of keeping everything angular and geometric, which I think is more like the mid-century modern style, everything is pretty rectangular, they put it into contrast with a lot of organic shapes, streamlined. Again, this whole obsession with ergonomics, streamlined trains and planes, the Greyhound logo, for example. And it's really this contrast that also creates this tension. I feel like it's like this trifecta of organic shapes, really geometric shapes, and then the richness in all of the materials and colors. So for the organic shapes, it's round edges and also a lot of shell patterns and snail patterns and elements. So now there is the question, what am I gonna do? How am I going to take all of these elements that are a lot, and how can I go about integrating them in my own home bit by bit? So this is what I'm thinking. For the walls, I want to, also it's a rental, so I want to keep it quite neutral, like a warm neutral, like a bone color or a light brown. I've been looking at two brands. There is a French brand called Argyle, and there is another Dutch brand, it's called Lab Color the World. There is a risk if you go light brown that it turns out orange and that it looks orange. So this is definitely not what I want. I want to be very diligent with that. There is a nice color, it's called Wool number 108 by Lab. I'm looking at that, that could be nice. I definitely don't want it to be a cold color, definitely not. I don't want it to be too neutral either. Or Daydream number 436, that is a little bit darker, but maybe it's risky because it's a bit grayish and I don't want anything grayish either. So I would have to test. And I feel the Argyle one, the brand Argyle, they have a lot of really good sandy, ochre brown colors that I'm really attracted to. So for those two brands, my conclusion is the Dutch brand has the better bony white colors and the French brand has the better beigey brownish tones. So those two I'm looking at. And then there is the question, how could I implement some sort of contrast or another element like the Greek keys? Could I frame the ceiling or even frame the doors with just a wallpaper band? Maybe there is a peel and stick wallpaper band. I don't know if this will look really cheap. Or it could elevate the whole concept by adding some sort of detail or contrast. So maybe it could be a Greek key, but maybe that's even too much. Maybe it would just be a line or something really subtle. The thinner maybe the better. It is a touch, but it's not overpowering since the space is small. I think I have to be careful with that. These are my thoughts on the wall treatments, which brings me then to another element. How often am I saying element? Which brings me then to the curtains. I've been thinking a lot about what I could do with the curtains, because adding curtains is an instant upgrade. It's framing the window. You can add something rich in texture, in fabric. So it's giving instantly this cozy, elevated hotel vibe, which I'm always after. And for the curtains, I was thinking I could go with something velvety or silky. I have to really be convinced about the texture. If it's like a silk, it could be like a moire effect. That would be quite nice. Gives a bit of movement, adds a bit of texture. And if it's just velvet, I don't know, maybe that's even too boring to just have the velvet. I could do the curtains myself, because I guess like sewing them is a thing I could handle. And on top of that, why not also add some sort of stripe detail? So again, I could get one of those like silky gros grain bands and maybe just frame the border, maybe have like some little small Greek key elements just in the corners, something really simple, but that would add contrast, another layer, and another geometric element. As for the color, I want to go rich. It could be a mustardy, chartreusey color, like an ochre, something yellow, or maybe even orange, like a burnt amber, that kind of thing. That could be nice and powerful. It would also be an option to have a checkered fabric. I was thinking about that, but maybe it's a bit too much. Maybe I can find a checkered band for stitching onto the curtains. Maybe that's an option. Or I could do on a smaller furniture piece, like a stool or something, maybe I could use a checkered fabric as well. And on the famous wall that I was talking about in my last video that I'm so annoyed with because it's quite empty and not very appealing, it is a wide wall, but I need something narrow. If I put a furniture piece there, it has to be something very narrow. Therefore, what I'm thinking is something like a console, like a narrow console, or even like a narrow desk, a secrétaire. I don't know if you know what it is, like a secrétaire that you can like close and open. And that would then be, to bring in the wood, that furniture piece would then be something like a lacquered piece or like an exotic wood, burled wood maybe as well. If there is enough space, I think it would be nice to have like a desk, even though the console would be more practical for storage. So in terms of storage, maybe I should go for the console. But if I could have a little desk, it would also be nice to then add a little stool that I can upholster. And through other decorative elements, I would bring in all the other materials, like maybe glass or chrome or bronzy bookends. That's always a good thing. And also a big thing is symmetry. So it would be good if I had in some corners of the room, two on each side. I could bring in some gold through a table clock. That's something a bit old school, and forgotten. But how stylish is a table clock? My grandmother has one, so I feel like this is why I'm kind of inspired by that, because it reminds me of my grandma. And to bring in even more textiles and more drama, I would imagine maybe like a chinoiserie pattern for ruffled lampshades. I think this is very doable. And if you go shopping, then you also don't have to worry about the lampshade, or I mean, talking about you, I'm talking about me, then I don't have to worry about the state of the lampshade because I'm gonna get it bespoke anyways, and like choosing kind of an Art Deco I fabric. And as a glass element, I could get like a nice fluted glass vase, or even two, to get more symmetry. So right now, this is where I'm at with my little makeover project. I mentally already started by totally organizing my studio space. Now was a good time to do that because the guys that I share the space with are out of the office for the whole week. And now everything is clean and I can go into my summer holiday break. I will be going to Austria and I hope I can also go to Sweden after that. Maybe I can also go visit some of those antique flea markets or vintage dealers. So now you know my plans, my summer plans. I'm gonna keep you posted. Let me know what you're working on right now because I'm always here for more inspo as well. Thanks for watching and I see you next time. Bisous.